content. So the two examples I'm going to show you just have kind of background music. But in going through the exercise of finding my niche, I realized I wanted to share what I was exploring already. And first with photos, but then as Instagram, I'm a true millennial, so Instagram is my favorite platform, which is the most engaged generation on Instagram are millennials. And and so as the app evolved, I started creating some videos as well. But to be authentic to myself, I actually still don't really appreciate videos that where the person, the content creator, is the main character in it. I know it totally works, and a lot of people really enjoy it. But for me, I realized that I didn't want to do that. I wanted to. I feel like sometimes for my goal and mission with my content, that takes away from the story of the place I'm trying to highlight if I'm in it, and because people could get hung up with like what I look like or what I sound like, and just so many different things that I really wanted it to be just about the place versus me at the place. And so I rarely show my face online and really just focus on kind of short clips of the actual location with the history on text. Very rarely will I do a voiceover, and very rarely will I ever show my face. And that was authentic and has made it sustainable for me. Otherwise, I would burn out pretty quickly. So another example is, again, for this one, there's just a instrumental background song attached to it. So sadly, you won't be able to hear it. But here's an example of a piece of content that I create when I'm not in DC. All right, so again, taking a similar approach to when I'm in DC, I like to find kind of more unique places. And this was on a recent trip to Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, where a site like this is totally something I would gravitate toward. It's not all locals even know about it, and it has history, but is also super unique and unexpected. And so it is an old quarry, but the old quarry hills literally look like white sand cliffs off of the river in Lancaster County, and this piece of content did quite well because it's a little bit more unique, and people kind of saved it and shared it as a place they would want to visit if they were ever in Lancaster County. So that's kind of like how I found my niche. And then to kind of help with voice, I like to see audience, because like one voice should be still authentic to who you are, but it is helpful to kind of know who you're speaking to. So as you're posting content, more people are going to follow you and engage. And there's a lot of expensive tools that you could pay for out there, but I still think a lot of the data, it is all pulled just natively from the different social platforms. And so for Instagram, they do give you, and all the platforms are like this, they give you enough data to go off of to kind of know who you are speaking to help craft your voice. And so for me, I've realized with my piece of content, you can see that over 70% are women versus men. And the age group is actually people that are within my age group, so 35 to 44. And then with the second, it being 25 to 34, and then 45 to 54, there's not many people under the age of 24 that are following me, which makes sense. And then you can see here the highest represented cities of where my audience are is, again, tracks. It's DC, Arlington, Alexandria, which are two suburbs. And then the last is Baltimore, which is close to DC. And a lot of DC and Baltimore people visit each other's cities quite often. And then New York as well. I travel to New York a lot. New York and DC, a lot of people visit those two cities. And so it makes sense that this is where my audience lives. And then that's just helpful for me to know. Be like, okay, like it's okay if I continue to just focus on the city of DC because the highest percentage of my audience happens to live in the city. And then women is interesting. I think especially in DC, women tend to be most very engaged with kind of neighborhood. Instagram skews like higher. The average user tends to be a woman as well. And then my age group, sometimes on story, I share about my personal life, like having a 9-year-old daughter and being a father. And so people who are in DC within 35 to 44 tend to have a kid kind of around my age if they have kids. And then so I kind of look at the overall data in the app, but then I also take note of what I call kind of like super fans. And usually that's a term I use for like a brand versus seems like arrogant for my like own personal content creation. But essentially it's like your most engaged users. And so these are the people that are going to be the ones showing up in the comments, who might send you a direct message. And what I do is like those are the people that are the most engaged. And so I overlay the general data that I find within the app with the data that I track just on my own from these superfans. So here's an example from the REI Beatles reel that I showed, is that here's 2 comments. One from Black Girl with Books, and then Jackie Can _1. Both these 2 people, I do actually like know them through Instagram, and they are 2 of my most engaged people who will often comment and share my content. And so I have a spreadsheet of all these different people and all the data that I know about them, from handle to gender if they share that, and within kind of guessing based on what they share, which age group they're in, where they actually live, and then what they focus on their content with, or any other notes that might be helpful. And so Jackie, she is actually a historian, and she focuses on Black history and skating. And I often cover Black history in DC, and so which makes sense why she often shares my content. And then Black Girl with Books, I recently met her at an event. So from there, so super fans, what I like to do is take the audience data within the app and then the information I have from super fans. And then I take those 2 things to create a persona, which are just an easy way to speak to a certain audience. And so oftentimes personas have names and details about their lives like you would a neighbor, colleague, or friend. So a lot of brands will do this. When I was at Coca-Cola for one of our brands, Honest Tea and Honest Kids, we created 3 different personas and gave them names and actually created cutouts of these 3 personas, and then any detail about them we wrote it on a post-it note and would literally read our social media copy to them just as a practice to make sure that it hits at least one, if not all, of the personas. And so our main content had to speak to all 3, but then some of our more niche content would speak to just 1 or 2 of the personas. And they literally were by our desk every single day, and they very much felt like an extension of our team. And so for my personal social media, I could have taken the data in the app and the superfan data that I track. I created this persona, which is kind of much in line with my authentic life as well. But her name's Jackie, and she's a millennial who lives in DC, or within 5 miles of the city. She's a mom of 1 to 2 older elementary school kids, same age as my daughter. She works full-time. She likes to engage her neighborhood and city by getting to know neighbors and visiting different parts of the city. She's naturally curious, but is short of time to research deeply on her own. She's middle class with some money to spend on restaurants, events. She loves to travel when she can. She tends to have a bachelor's degree and reads newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post, and identifies center to left leaning politically. So that is, again, how I try to find my niche, and then using my audience data to kind of help with finding my voice and who I'm actually speaking to. Honestly, I do think it's still helpful to kind of at least learn a little bit of storytelling. And at least in terms of like some of the elements, like how do you like hook people, and because I do think like content that adds value in some way is what's going to get shared. Because as you know, there's just on every platform there's so much content and so much noise, and so you have to find a way to stick out some way, whether it's like really good video editing or really good storytelling or really funny captions or like whatever it is. I would at least find a perspective, and because I think for me, and maybe this is because I'm like a millennial, but when I follow other content creators, because I see it so much like a part of just who they are in real life, if they're all over the place, it's hard to kind of know like who they are. And so, for example, like one of my friends, he a food reporter for a while, but then he left to work for a huge consultancy around like DEI, and then sadly lost his job the last year. But he created just like off the cuff. He had a few thousand followers, but he wasn't trying to be a content creator. And then he created this reel about a lavender marriage, and which is way back in the day when it wasn't as like accepted that some gay men would marry straight women, and they would just have a beautiful relationship called like a lavender marriage. And so he was like making a funny reel saying like, let's bring this back, like whoever wants to do this with me, let me know. And tons of celebrities saw it randomly in the Explore, like Khloe Kardashian, and she like posted a comment to be like, sign me up, like I will totally do this with you. And like and it got like tens of millions of views and tons of followers overnight for him. And so now he's trying to become a full-time content creator, and he has like almost 100,000 followers, but he's still kind of trying to find his voice, where some of his like his sponsored posts, for example, like seem a little bit like all over the place. And so I think he's awesome, he's such a great guy, but I think he's still trying to figure out, okay, like what is his like niche and how does it connect to his authentic life. And his organic content totally does that, but some of the sponsored posts are kind of random, like now he's like promoting a mattress company or this or that, and it's not connected. And so I do think it's still helpful to know, like, okay, like who am I, and how can I be more organized so people can at least think they know who I am online, versus kind of be all over the place. We're like, what, like you're talking about food in one post, and now you're talking about running, and now you're talking about cats and travel, and like, and so, and there is a genre like lifestyle, people kind of do that, but it's still a little bit more like focused. And so I would at least still come up with a plan, even if you just want to post. I kind of just fell into content creation. It was never my goal, where I just like happen to be a millennial. I love photography and love to explore, and so Instagram was just a natural way to like kind of share, not ever knowing that people would like start to follow. And then over the years, just like tens of thousands of people follow, mainly in the DC area. And that's where I kind of went through that focus, like that exercise of like, okay, like they're following for a reason. Let's like distill this down, and then let's get a little bit more organized and create these content series. And that's where I went through this life kind of journey and map of like, okay, like here's everything about me. What other things could I share online now that people are here already? That's authentic, and it kind of maps to my mission. And that was like a helpful exercise. And then I even reached out to some people, like longtime followers, be like, hey, like what content do you appreciate? And in my story would ask for people to write in, like, what do you want to see more of? Which neighborhoods do you want me to cover? And it more from like a journalistic lens, and all that data was helpful. And so I have this master work of all the ideas that people have submitted over the years.